Okay, welcome to our YouTube channel, Mama Chow and Spicy Wonton, episode 18. And this one, we're going to talk about China's economic growth over the decades, but especially from the 80s until the 2000s plus, and what surprised us the most, and even compare some of the infrastructure advancements that are even better than many countries, including the United States. And we'll start from a Mao's phrase that was used in the speech in 1956. We'll explain the context from that phrase and how it has changed and transformed the country since then. So, Mama Chow, do you want to kick that off?
Yeah. Okay. In 1956, Chairman Mao claimed 一穷二白 was happened in China. When he said that, declared that, he did not say was 一穷二白. He said is.
Yeah.
Actually, it's true.
And so to explain what that means, 一穷二白, 一穷 means literally first poor. Arbai means second white or blank. And in Mao's speech, he explained poor meant that China did not have much industry in 1956 and the agriculture was underdeveloped. And blank, Mao explained, meant that China was like a blank sheet of paper and its culture and scientific level was not high. So this was basically a plea to say China needed to develop and needed to modernize. And so we saw a little bit of it when we were there. I mean, we talked in previous episodes about how there was basically rations when we were there in the 80s that just started to disappear when we left in 1989. And we just had Kentucky Fried Chicken. That was the first fast food chain that opened in Beijing.
They are so excited.
It was so excited. I was excited. A lot of people were excited. There were long lines to go, to KFC's grand opening. And I think I was just disappointed they didn't have the mashed potatoes that you have here typically in the US. But it was exciting. And even they had a quote unquote normal supermarket in the Lidu compound, that where you could get, toilet paper that wasn't like Soviet style rough toilet paper, but like nice toilet paper that, spoiled, industrialized advanced economies use. So we started seeing that in 1989. But Mama Chow, do you want to talk about some of your other, like, there's so many things to talk about when it talks about modernizing, China, but maybe talk about the first thing you mentioned with hotels, and then we can talk about Shanghai.
Yeah. Okay. When we were stationed in Beijing in the 80s, I think I have to say we are lucky to see the transformation for China from a poor, very poor country to developing country.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the hotel. You know what the Chinese hotel looked like before? They assigned a staff
Hmm.
sitting every floor. There's one person sitting there watching everybody,
Uh-huh.
watching. And also, when you come to the hotel, you have to give up your passport to give
Hmm.
to the hotel. So maybe that's the even happen now.
Yeah.
Even now, you have to do that, but they don't have anybody sitting there anymore. But the one uh, good thing is they provide hot water, hot water bottle in the
Hmm.
room. You just open the door, just wave your hand, say,
Oh,
I
and the
want hot
guy will
water.
come.
Yeah, they will come and give
Yeah.
you hot water.
Well, they don't have people anymore because that with technology, right? They're so modernized and
Yeah,
advanced now. They just have cameras everywhere in
yeah, they have
a like a semi-police state. But do you want to talk about Shanghai too and the development or what?
no, we were in Beijing. And
Hmm.
in Beijing, everything is underdeveloped. Everything, no color, no style, no choice.
Yeah.
And one of my cousin's husband, educated from MIT as
Hmm.
architect. He is the chief architect department as director.
Hmm.
He went to a business trip to North America, to Europe, to everywhere in the
Mm-hmm.
world to investigate their building structure.
Okay.
So when he come back, I asked him many times. I said, when can we see any modern, better uh, building? You know,
Mm-hmm.
he said it takes time. By then, there's only a few blueprint you can use, just like Soviet. When you look at the building, just like
Yeah, well,
Soviet
you're taking
Union's
the
building.
like communist buildings where it's like very square, it's gray, there's only a few
Yeah,
models, that kind of thing.
and in the night, at night, there's no lights because they
Yeah.
want to save
So with
electricity.
that, we'll share an example from Shanghai because that is the most dramatic change compared to Beijing, I would say.
Yeah,
So you can see in this picture here, Shanghai, this is the 1980s picture. This is the Bund area where you see the tall buildings by the waterfront, so that's what it looked like in the 1980s. And on the other side of the river, which river is this in Shanghai, Mom?
黄埔.
Huangpu River, right?
Mm.
On the other side is Pudong. And so in one of our episodes, Mama Chow talked about how her mother worked in the countryside in Pudong. That's
Yeah,
Pudong on the other side of where these big buildings
they're
are.
all countryside,
Yeah.
all the
And
village.
now you can see this is what it looks like now. That's Pudong is on the other side, the modernized sort of version. They're trying to create like a modernized sort of financial center. That's where a lot of corporate buildings are.
Yes,
They're trying to create like a New York kind of Wall Street style type of center. That's also where in our prior episodes we talk about the Wild West, where my late father had an encounter in one of these buildings. That was in Pudong, which before, as we said, was like this. It was a countryside. There was nothing on the other side of that. And at nighttime, this is what it looks like. It's all lit up. So it's crazy. And this is kind of the dreary 1980s look, 1983 in Shanghai. But
yeah,
obviously today it's super modernized, like um, Seoul, Korea, or Hong Kong. It definitely, and like New York, they've tried, modernize the cities to a largest
yeah.
extent.
Before everything is very uh, monotonous.
Monotonous, yeah.
Yeah, very
And now
simple.
now everything's modernized, even the airports. Like, I mean, we talk about KFC, but just to quickly pivot, I mean, there's just now, I don't know, I haven't been to China recently, but even when we were there in the 2000s, you can find the most famous Italian thin Neapolitan pizzeria, the most famous, French restaurants. They had everything, at that point. But I guess the biggest difference is the infrastructure, right? I mean, because
Yes, infrastructure.
China
Yes,
didn't have anything. 1956, when Mao did that speech, right? There was nothing, right? He was talking about how China was so backwards economically, agriculture, industry. So it was somewhat easier for them to build up a new fancy airport or infrastructure. And when you compare to the airports here in the US now, we have a lot of problems with our airports. Like whether it's Newark, but even New York has had problems with JFK and LaGuardia. They're terrible airports to travel through, and you think about all the executives, corporate executives in New York City flying through JFK, LaGuardia. I mean, it's been like that for 15, 20 years, and you can't even compare to, Shanghai's like Pudong Airport, for example. Again, even Beijing is very nice, right?
yeah. They said uh, if you go before and after China, 6 months, you will see much different. This
Yeah,
is
the
how fast they
advanced
develop. Yeah,
changes,
advanced.
yeah. Because they're happening so quickly, right? So this is just example of
Yes,
Shanghai's airport, very modern. I mean, this is somebody posting 5 months ago, very modern, beautiful infrastructure. And, New York airport's known as like one of the worst. See, these are examples of people like lying on the ground in New York airport because constantly delays and, controllers we have issues with in Newark where they lost contact, which is pretty terrifying. And this is a situation of our airports. People crowded and delays, and you can't get on a plane, compared to Shanghai, it's like clean and orderly and modernized. So,
so
um,
basically they change from monotonous to diverse. to
Diverse, like they're not no longer just a white
yeah.
piece of paper like Mao said in 1956. They're colorful, diverse, they're modernized, and so it's yeah, it's pretty shocking the changes, that have happened.
No, for from basic people, Chinese people, you can tell from their outfit.
Right.
Very colorful,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
very bright, very beautiful. Before, like only gray and blue. We'll
Well, it was
talk
a
about that.
communist style outfit. They had blue,
Yeah.
they had gray, they had, yeah. So, and we showed that in one of those our episodes, what they looked like in the 80s, how people dressed. They didn't have much color, and now they've just come a long way. Obviously, modernized their infrastructure, the cities, skyscrapers, and so,
You know,
yeah, I mean, it's impressive.
I don't, I don't want to compare the city between China and the U.S.
Okay.
because it's difficult to compare. I just have to say, people have to see to believe for themselves. Otherwise, before everybody goes to China, they want to see a typical underdeveloped country, just
Mm-hmm.
like Russia. Now is totally different. It's amazing. Of
Yeah.
course, after the development, there's pros and cons
Yeah.
for the consequences, right? So we are talking about the beautiful thing. There's something not so beautiful. We
Yeah.
will we will
Well,
talk about
I
it
mean,
later.
like I have been to India. I mean, last time I was in India was a while ago, so it was 2008 or 9. And India at that time was not as developed as China. When you're talking about the airports or even the cities.
How about now?
I don't know. I haven't been there recently. I don't know. But obviously, a lot of companies are now trying to shift, iPhone manufacturing from China
Production,
to
yeah.
India. I mean, there's a lot of other companies that are trying to do that. We'll see how that goes. I know there's a lot of regulations in India. I mean, China's, um, government tends to be more business friendly. So we'll see how that, goes in the future. But yeah, compared to some other countries as large as China in their development, the progress they made is pretty incredible. I mean, I remember our Spanish friends, we were traveling in China, they were shocked that Carrefour, the French supermarket, is all over Shanghai.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
mean, they have everything at that time when we were there in the 2000s. So, anyway, this is just a short snapshot to talk about because we've talked a lot about the issues and problems, but just sort of the impressive development and modernization of such a large country and population in such a very short period of time.
Mm. Thank you for watching.
Yeah, don't forget to
Bye
like and
bye.
subscribe. Bye.